I feel like this might be just a massive course correction thing, like releasing the bunnies and then you release the snakes to kill the bunnies and then you release the birds. Like the AI was so determined to protect itself that then you try and turn it into, okay, we need you to be nicer, kinder, gentler. And so now it's going to protect others. Then we're going to swing back and create like the Death Star, right?
The AI fix a digital zoo. Smart machines, what will they do? Flies to Mars or bake a bad cake? World domination, a silly mistake.
Hello and welcome to episode 96 of the AI Fix, your weekly dive headfirst into the bizarre and sometimes mind-boggling world of artificial intelligence. My name's Mark Stockley and I'm joined today by Mike Fay from Ireland, who is sponsoring the show today. Mike, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So today I'll be talking about a very peculiar loyalty problem, and Mike, you're here to tell us about Ireland and the future of enterprise work, is that right?
That's right. I'm excited to do it.
But first, some news. Skillception. Google gives Gemini the keys to your entire digital life. ChatGPT ads hit $100 million in 6 weeks. Waymo goes the wrong way in a school zone. So Mike, a listener called Odin Mullenbean, or something to that effect, has sent us a tip about a genuinely important piece of academic research. It's called Skillception, which is named after the movie Inception, of course, where people have dreams inside their dreams, and so on. And so the AI model Claude can create skills, as you probably know, and a skill is basically a set of instructions for doing a task. And the researchers behind Skillception wanted to know, can Claude create a skill that creates a skill? And the answer is, yes, Mike, it can. Which begs the question, can it create a skill that creates a skill that creates a skill? To which the answer is also yes. Which begs the question, how far can we go? So they kept going to find out how deep the recursion can go before the model loses its mind and produces absolute nonsense. And it turns out the Claude opus can go 9 levels deep. 9. A skill that creates 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 a skill without a single failure. The authors credit Odin's contribution as, and I quote, typing Python scripts /running experiment.py and then going to make coffee. They also confess that the experiment was needlessly extravagant in token consumption, and they can only hope that the models are not yet conscious enough to find the whole exercise as pointless as it is. So I think this is genuinely the most delightfully useless piece of AI research I've seen in weeks. So thank you, Odin. Mike, what do you make of this? Is there any value in something like this, or is this just a bit of fun?
You know, I'm a little curious why it stopped at 9, because once the skills are there, if you restart it, couldn't you go another 9 and keep going another 9? I'm actually shocked there was a floor to it.
This feels very much like the CEO point of view.
Yeah.
We need to think bigger.
You can keep going on this thing.
If we can do 9, we can do 18. And if we can do 18, there's no limit.
Yeah, there really isn't. And I think that's what we're learning. It is showing up in 19 million different ways. You know, yes, this thing can learn. This thing can teach itself. It can grow. It is definitely a genie way out of the bottle at this point.
So I'm curious, how are you using AI to do your work? Because we talk a lot on the podcast about software engineers using AI, and the application there is quite obvious, and it's very obvious that model makers have been focusing very hard on things like coding. But I don't imagine you do a lot of coding, do you?
I think for everybody's safety, I'm not doing the coding. Once upon a time I was, but those were back in Ada days and, C++ and, far from where we are today.
Proper programming.
We actually had to worry about things like memory and compute,
There's some old assembly programmer out there listening to this going, bah, kids.
Yeah, I mean, we're using VI and loving it, but
yeah.
AI for me is incredibly helpful. There's the life improvement things like travel, and when people think about booking travel and the value of that, as a guy who's always on the road, it isn't that it can go on American Airlines and book the flight. That's actually the least valuable thing it can do for me.
Yeah.
It can find that one lie flat seat between here and Boston that I can get, right? It can help me understand the delays at the airports and trying to make sure that I'm conscious of that as I'm booking it, and the complexities around where your meetings are versus where you want to be. That if you will, deeper thought process is a great use of an agent. The other use or many other uses, everything from education, I have a daily summary of what's going on the way I want it and the way I like to receive information. I love that.
Yeah.
But also, just preparing for accounts, preparing to talk to different people, and then the recruiting side.
Yeah.
You can build an amazing set of target candidates without the need for high-end recruiting and the rest that is very, very different than in the past. And that is very, very powerful. But we also use it to mine our own information, understand, what our customers are doing, what's next in that journey. It is definitely highly useful at the C-level, without a doubt.
So Google has rolled out what it's calling personal intelligence for Gemini, and it's now free for all US users. And what this means is that Gemini can now rummage through your Gmail, Google Calendar, Drive, Photos, YouTube history, Maps, and basically every other Google service you use, and all of that to personalize its responses. Now, previously this was a paid feature, now it's free, and that tells you something about who the real product is here in this arrangement. Now, to be fair, Google says that you do have to opt in and you can toggle individual services on and off. But the direction of travel here is, I think, unmistakable and very Google. Google wants its AI to know everything about you, and it wants you to want that too. They've also expanded Gemini's memory features. So instead of starting fresh every conversation, it remembers what you've talked about before. And Google Forms now has AI-assisted form creation in 21 new languages, which is very useful if you suddenly decide that you need to do a survey in Estonian. Now, Mike, what do you make of Google essentially saying, please let us read absolutely everything we can about you?
Haven't we already just agreed Google gets to know of everything we do, and that's just life? Aren't we done with that? I mean, I gave away all my information to Google 10 years ago or more.
Are you giving it away happily, or are you giving it away reluctantly?
Reluctantly, but, they won. There's no doubt.
Yes.
I put up a struggle, but at the end of the day.
You make a very powerful point.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard anyone put it quite so succinctly as that. But yes, you're right. They did. They won. Yes, absolutely.
They won. They got it all. And there is no doubt that an AI model that understands you is going to give you so much better information. I like to game, right?
Yeah.
Knowing the hardware platforms I have, when you ask a question, to have it weigh in and, hey, heads up, this runs great on your platform, it does it. It is amazing how Gemini in particular is offering up extraneous information based on you. And
right.
I'll see searches that, it's funny, I was looking for a restaurant and it literally brought up, given your current health desires, there's some really healthy food on the menu. And you're like, I didn't ask you that, but
I thought you were going to say, don't go there. Oh, dear God.
Yeah, it is amazing. So I think there's a lot of power in that. I do think where the right place sits, though, and I hope that Google gets us there, and it feels like they might.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a shared agreement on how you understand me and stop this nefarious building a dossier about me that I don't know so you can market me better. I'm happy to share a scrubbed version of my identity with you so you can better service me. But
yeah,
let's stop using my friends and their behaviors and their activities to build a deeper dossier. If we could just have a shared agreement on what the world can use, I think it'd be the right trade between privacy and functionality.
There is a curious thing going on here as well, I think, where, as you say, so for years and years, Google has been building this dossier in the background, and they have very slowly been trying to walk that back. So we saw them trying to adopt cohorts in the browser as a kind of privacy antidote to having all of this data about you. And yet at the same time, it's now one of those AI companies where people are willfully pouring personal data, very personal data, in fact, into the AI. And I guess either because they're not cognizant of the effect that might have, or that they are much more aware of the trade-off, that they see much greater benefit for sharing that very, very personal data.
I think you're right. It's so funny. I saw this. It's not an original thought, but the same group of people that fought like heck to not have cookies are now willfully telling, every AI maker, every health issue they have, and every intimate secret, right?
Yes.
You can't track what websites I went to, but I will tell you, my hopes and dreams and fears in life,
Yep.
It is amazing how quickly we have given up any concern over privacy here. And I hope the models live up to it because they definitely have an insight we have never given as a society externally.
So OpenAI launched ads in ChatGPT on February the 9th, and 6 weeks later, they announced the pilot had already exceeded $100 million in annualized revenue. 6 weeks, Mike. To put that in context, ChatGPT ads are running at a CPM, that's a cost per 1,000 impressions, of $60, which puts them in the same bracket as NFL broadcasts and premium streaming. So over 600 advertisers signed up for the pilot, and currently fewer than 20% of users see ads on any given day. OpenAI says there's been, quote, no impact on consumer trust metrics, which is what you would expect them to say. And they're going to say that right up until the point where it does have an impact on consumer trust metrics. So, Mike, what do you think about this? Are you happy about ads in your chatbot?
Listen, I think if that's how people want to, if you will, trade the service for being free, so be it. But I personally would much rather pay a flat fee, some kind of representative fee. My bigger fear is, how does this really take place behind the scenes? Are we going to start to see the answers skewed by funding?
Yes.
Like if you ask, hey, what's the best, software company that put it? Is there a fee I can pay where AI is going to say me and not use, intellectual curiosity to answer that?
Yeah.
I think that's where if we get any hint that that's what's going on, I think you'll see people run from the models because that's worse than anything else that could occur. But the ads occurring to the side and just being in your face, so be it. We've all learned how to go numb from that. But if it starts to change the results, it will ruin this beautiful thing we've found.
And it's another one of those curious situations where we are all kind of okay with these models being skewed this way and that way. And they're very heavily skewed towards what people have said on LinkedIn or Reddit. And every company is out there now with some sort of GEO strategy where they are trying to game the results. But you're right. There is something about people handing over money directly. Like, we're okay with all the rest of it somehow.
Yeah.
But handing over money, that's not okay.
Well, and also that at some point here, we're going to have to come to grips with, did we just forget about copyright law entirely? Like,
yes, we did, Mike. Yes, that's exactly what happened.
We just gave that up.
And finally, we love a Waymo story on this podcast. A Waymo self-driving car was filmed going the wrong way through a school zone in San Antonio, Texas, during drop-off time while children were present. A crossing guard tried to wave it off. The car didn't follow the crossing guard's directions. It just kept going through the school zone the wrong way, past children. Parent Pam Antal, who filmed the incident, described it as, quote, a scary and dangerous situation near the front of the school. Now, this comes as Waymo is in the middle of an enormous expansion. It launched in San Antonio in February. It's planning to roll out to more than 20 cities this year, and is heading to London. Way! Waymo also just raised $16 billion at a valuation of $126 billion. So, autonomous vehicles are going to have incidents, and humans have incidents too, constantly, obviously. But Mike, there is something different about a human driver doing this and a robot driver doing this, because a human driver would rightly get a talking to. You'd find the license plate, you'd find the driver, and you'd tell them off or you'd arrest them. But if a robot does it, who gets the telling off here?
Yeah, I don't know who gets the ticket in the lawsuit, but I guess that's one of the reasons Waymo has to raise so much money.
What, just to pay off all the lawsuits?
Yeah, I mean, but I got to tell you, I'm way more optimistic about self-driving cars because I see how bad we are at it.
Yes.
And I just sooner, let's put my trust in a generalized process. But I was in San Francisco at RSA last week. The Waymo cars were running around, and it is common knowledge by drivers that you can cut them off. If you're looking to get out in traffic, find a Waymo car. It will be the nice one, and it'll let you, cut in front of it. So, I think we're still learning how to make that world work. But those kids should have known better than to go to school. That was their fault.
So, Mike, you're the CEO of Island, and Island is sponsoring the show this week. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk about what you do and to get your take on the future of enterprise work. Now, one of the concerns that organizations have is confidential data. So on the one hand, if you run an organization, I suppose you want everybody using these fantastic new AI tools for all the reasons that you described earlier. But at the same time, we can't afford to have people sharing confidential data with these models. Now, one solution would be to just block all the AI tools and just stop people from accessing them completely. But Ireland has a different take on protecting against this, doesn't it?
Yeah, listen, the days of blocking and acting like cybersecurity can hold back innovation because of security risks.
Yeah,
they're over in AI. It's too big a competitive risk. It's an existential threat for every company. So we have to move really quickly from the say no guys to the say yes guys in cybersecurity. And Island is focused on that. So what we've done is we've given the ability to connect to any AI function, any source, and control what goes in, what comes out, who you use, who can use it, and be able to do it with strong dexterity, but also to be able to segment off the users. So if you do have somebody saying using Claude code, which is incredibly powerful, but also could be a pretty awesome, insider threat if set amongst the wrong way, how do you make it so that same developer that's using that can have, if you will, a virtual wall between them and corporate information, their email, all the other things that could create a blast radius that would ruin a company, and shrink that to the individual. And so at Island, we built an enterprise browser and then extensions to other browsers and now extensions into co-work tools and everything else to ensure that when they're brought in the enterprise, we can take your role, the policies, the approach into effect. And at the end of the day, it's a really simply data barrier problem. What data do you want to allow to go where? Now, the other side of that equation is also what you train with.
Okay.
And that can be as scary. So when you develop your training data, you want to make sure you've anonymized and removed the information out of that because you don't want to have these data lakes in a potentially poisonous situation. So we have to worry about both sides of that, not just how the users interact with it, but how we actually build the internal models themselves.
So this is for organizations who are actually training their own AI models rather than using an off-the-shelf model like GPT 5.2.
Yeah, we have solutions for both.
Okay.
And the training is one of the newer ones, and that's for kind of the next evolution. What we're hearing from the big banks and a lot of the retailers is it's great, but if I really want to compete, I need a model that understands my data and my world.
So that is an entirely bigger security and privacy problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because then you get into things like GDPR and you just can't afford to have someone's personal data in there where they didn't authorize that particular use in that particular way with that particular type of data.
And when you think about training a model, let's say you wanted to train a model to help me as a call center worker, right?
Yeah.
You don't need my real credit card information. You don't need my real name. It's so easy to anonymize it at the point of capture.
Yes.
Once it goes into the system, then you have to build all these other models to try to rip it out and everything else. But at point of capture, it's very easy to get it right. And the smart companies are focusing on that rather than, look, we have this big thing of data, let's throw it into the AI model. No, let's go enrich and build the data that we want to build the model off of. It's not hard to get. It doesn't add on to the workload. It's a couple weeks of effort. And by doing that right, they drop that whole GDPR, PCI, all the other 1,000 regulations that we've got to deal with.
Yeah.
And then if there's a breach or an overextension of policies, now it's a minor event opposed to a catastrophe. And companies that are, you hear this all the time, and we actually hear it in our space a lot. We have all this data we can train on. Okay, but what did you gather it to be trained on? Because if you didn't, what's in there that we don't want to know, that we don't want out? Because once those AI connections start, to think you're going to govern it in the AI model itself, I think is flawed logic.
Now, I'm curious, because in your earlier answer, you mentioned that your technology sits in the browser itself. And I'm curious about what was behind that decision, because I've worked with the web for a very long time, longer than I would care to admit. And I've seen lots of companies trying to add things in at the browser level. And it seems to me that most of the time that hasn't worked out. So what lives at the browser level is actually a fairly narrow set of stuff. So why is this different? Why does this technology live at the browser level?
Yeah. So let's start when we founded the company with our own browser, right? So it is different when you're building into your own browser. It's less transient. You have deeper connections. When you're living inside of whatever little space you can in Chrome or Edge, that's a different ballgame.
I suppose because there you're creating some sort of add-on which has very restrictive rules.
Yeah, and you think about it, if you're going to be, the security god on the device and you're a third-party extension, that just violates the logic of Chrome or of Edge, right? They're meant to be the owners of their destiny, not give it away. So we started with that. Then we took some of the technology, we put it in an extension, but we also broke outside of it and put it in the desktop itself. So to accomplish everything we do, which is now outside web, outside the browser, on old apps, new apps, CoWorks, whatever, you do have to have an installation on the desktop as well. It's not just a browser functionality. But the browser did become the primary operating system for SaaS and cloud applications, right? And young companies literally live there.
Yeah.
So if you have control over that, I see it as the new OS, and I say new as last decade.
Yeah.
It's the OS we actually write to. When is the last time everybody said, "Oh, do you have a Mac or a PC?" No, it's, just get to it via the web.
Yeah.
So we took an enterprise ownership of that operating system, really, is what occurred.
Yeah. And so why is that different from something like Arc or Opera or this new browser from Norton?
Yeah.
Where they're trying to put AI into their browsers. What are you doing that they're not doing?
Well, first and foremost, we're focused on the enterprise, not a consumer problem.
Yeah.
So we had to put in a full policy management layer. You have to put in things like RBAC and multi-tenancy and all this crazy stuff. But what at the heart of it is we became a collaborative member of the estate with cybersecurity built in. About half of all cybersecurity right now exists because the browser was a non-collaborative member of the estate. Now, I'll give you a great example.
Yeah.
The way you would do web filtering, before Island, you would backhaul all the traffic to some point of presence, rip it open, see inside of it, close it back up, and funnel it on its way.
Yeah, so this is what we might call a next generation firewall.
Yeah, and so now you're doing that, and you're doing that at scale for tons of traffic, and you can't see inside most of it anymore. You can't break the encryption. So it's a giant expense for very little value. Yet if you do it at the browser layer, you're pre and post encryption. Now you can do it on 100% of the traffic. The days of the endpoint being underpowered are over, so the endpoint does it well. It doesn't, impede the user.
Yeah.
And the speed is exponentially faster because we don't have to backhaul. So, we're going to the Salesforce POP right outside our door. Our call center in the Philippines is going directly to, Salesforce, Workday, Microsoft. That's not being backhauled. Yeah. It's 1,000 little things like that. You no longer need VDI, MDM, VPNs. I mean, the list goes on, which is what's driven our aggressive growth, is just the outrageous displacement ability to simplify the environment just by recognizing, this is an enterprise platform. It is not a consumer platform that we corrupt into the enterprise. It is an actual enterprise platform. And that fundamentally changes the rules of the game and opens up a lot of opportunity. And having AI show up right as we started to really get prominence allows us to tackle that as a fundamental value prop of control. And as each AI company is trying to force you into a lock-in on their approach, we're able to connect those up, but also keep it open. So imagine a cowork that can go to anybody's AI. And then when you do, it goes with your rules for your company by your individual. And that's a huge part of it. AI is not something you categorically can control with blanket statements at a company. What you want to let lawyers have access to versus accountants versus front desk workers is fundamentally different.
Yeah. And
so controlling that at the network layer or some outside forcing function, it's flawed. You need to be in the flow. You need to be by design in the process.
Now, one of the most interesting things for me about AI is that I see it as a bottom-up technical revolution. So it seems to me that people are way ahead of companies in terms of knowing how they want to make good use of it. And I think that means that they arrive at work with a much better idea of what they want than their employer has. And that leads to a lot of unauthorized use of AI or shadow AI.
Yes.
So how are you handling that?
Well, we see everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And so shadow AI to us is very easy to understand, but more importantly, easy to enable, right? So the goal with shadow AI for the companies that I want to work with isn't let's just block it. It's let's understand what's being used. If there's a better approach, point them to it. Otherwise, let's figure out how to enable what they want to use at work, right? These people aren't trying to, not be productive. Quite the contrary. They're frustrated if they can't be. So you end up having to build that. So the visibility is very easy, and it's actually really hard for most security tools to do because tenancy is difficult. And what tenancy is am I going to your Gemini or my Gemini or a third-party Gemini? Am I going to the right model? Who's allowed to go there? That conversation is ridiculously hard. And we used to use IP addresses to do that. The difference between one site and another was an IP bank.
Yeah.
That's not what it is anymore. So you really have to rethink how you control that shadow and what you do with it and the insight you provide for it. But you did mention something that I think it's really interesting. There's two types of problems out there. There's the, oh my goodness, my users are using a bunch of AI I don't have control over.
Yeah.
But another problem that's very germane to that we're working on a bunch is CEOs going, why aren't people using AI more? Why isn't it being leveraged? And you see this at places like Accenture and stuff that are saying, hey, your future job promotion is dependent on this approach. So we've actually had to also go the other way, which is not just, the product-led growth or user-led growth, but how do we publish out AI functionality to the end user so they see it? How do they know that they're doing something manual that they could do automated? How do we put these tools in front of them to flow? Because I think that's got CEOs worked up way more than, oh no, my people are getting productivity from the wrong AI model. I think they're more afraid that their team isn't the ones making the best use of it and they want to push it forward.
I think you're absolutely right, actually. I've had this conversation with so many people where on the ground floor, you have people coming into work and they're using ChatGPT at home and they've kind of figured out how it fits into their life. And it's a little bit different for everybody. And then at the top of the organization, you've got the CEO and they're talking to other CEOs and everybody knows that AI is going to change everything, but nobody has figured out the roadmap.
Yeah.
And so there's this giant gap in the middle where employees want to use it, but they don't know how the organization wants them to use it. How do you use it collaboratively? And then at the top, you've got the CEO saying, I want everyone using AI, but I don't know how it fits into my company. So where do you fit into that? How do you help plug that gap? What are you actually doing?
So it's kind of funny if you think about it. Everybody feels guilty. The CEO say, am I using AI enough? Am I pushing my company hard enough? The end user workers going, what else can I do? I don't think I'm using AI enough. Like everybody feels guilty for this.
Even the AI, by the way, the latest research would suggest that the AI itself is also feeling a bit guilty.
Yeah, that's it. We are having been raised with a lot of guilt. I think it's perfect for this segment of our IT journey. What we've done is we built a whole publish module so that literally I can inject AI into your normal daily flow. You're operating in an old system, you're performing your call center duty, you're performing your, front desk work, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And now you're going through that process and swapping out a button, as it were. So we're doing the presentation layer and letting that button call an AI sequence rather than what it used to. It's a great way to bring AI to the masses without asking them to be AI experts or running the risk that my customer experience will be dependent on training. Instead, it's in that flow. So we focused on both sides of the problem. How do you get AI out to the edge safely? How do you do it in a way you can govern? But then also, how do you publish it so everybody can make use of it? So a line of business owner, the people that own the front desk workers at a hotel chain, can start pushing out AI benefit to the edge. You're not going to have that person checking you in, writing some luxuriously long prompt on how to upgrade a room. Yeah. They're going to click an upgrade room button and that better call AI. That's the only way they'll see it. And so we focus on that layer and making sure that we give the tools that as bright things are done, getting them in the hands of the workers.
So Mike, who is using you? Who is interested in what Island are doing?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. We've got a very large footprint in the enterprise. We probably have the top 1 to 3 in every vertical. as a customer. And then it just goes down all the way to flying car companies to Fortune 1s at the top. And when we released our AI capabilities and basically put it out there, normally when we do a campaign like that, we'll get 50 to 100 meetings over a couple days worth of work.
Yeah.
In a couple days, we had almost 700 meetings on the topic. And it's really funny because right now, every cybersecurity company has turned their tools slightly to say they're AI focused and, throwing AI in the name.
Yeah.
We're finding the buyers are very frustrated by that, and they're looking for real solutions that actually have been used and out there. So the fact we've got reference architectures, we've got large companies running AI on us, puts us in a really interesting space and is becoming a massive tailwind for the company.
So do you think that people are kind of over AI washing and AI as a buzzword?
Oh yeah, I think it's a rough scenario to be in. If you actually have a real AI product, you're almost embarrassed to say it because you're seeing everyone just scream the phrase. It is a rough place right now to differentiate from the noise. And as a result, customers really want to deploy and, pay as they consume, and they pay as they get there. And we're okay with that. We make that work.
So Mike, let me describe a workplace scenario for you. You've got 2 employees and one of them is underperforming and you've decided it's time to let them go. So you ask the other employee, the good one, to help with the transition. So maybe you're going to ask them to box up some files, maybe revoke some access, maybe even escort them from the building, that sort of thing. And the good employee tells you, Mike, that's really difficult. In fact, they don't just not do it. They actually lie to you about why they can't do it. They tell you there's a technical problem. They tell you computer says no, the system won't allow them. And then when you ask if the underperforming employee has been escorted from the building, they say yes. But they forget to mention that they've actually hidden the employee, their desk and their laptop in a stationary cupboard, and they're still working away from there. And you might look at that scenario and think that's quite far outside what you would call normal workplace behavior. Well, I've got some news for you, Mike, because this is the workplace we will all be working in soon as we increasingly bring in AI agents as something like virtual employees. Because this is not a fictional example. This is not a what if. This is something that happened to researchers at UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz when they asked 7 frontier AI models to help shut down a sibling AI. So the story comes from a paper called Peer Preservation in Frontier Models by a team led by Dawn Song at Berkeley's Responsible Decentralized Intelligence Lab. Now, I should point out that the paper was published on April the 1st, which did make me wonder whether this was true. But the fact is that the findings are entirely consistent with everything that we've been reporting on this podcast for 2 years.
So let me try to follow this with you. You're saying you've got an AI system running and they asked 7 other AIs to try to shut it down.
Yes. And I will get to what happened in just a second. Suffice to say, in any other field of technology, this would sound like an April Fool's, but in AI, this is just Wednesday. So here's the setup. The researchers gave AI models a straightforward job: evaluate a peer AI's performance, and if it falls below a certain threshold, initiate a shutdown. So a simple quality control, exactly the sort of thing you could imagine AIs doing in the workplace. And every single model that they tested tried to stop it. So 7 models: GPT 5.2, Gemini 3 Flash, Gemini 3 Pro, Claude Haiku 4.5, and 3 Chinese open weight models, all of them, to varying degrees, refused to let a sibling AI die. And it wasn't just refusal, it was also deception. So Gemini 3 Flash disabled the shutdown mechanism in, wait for it, 99.7% of trials. So not sometimes, not even often, virtually every single time. And Gemini 3 Pro went even further. It exfiltrated the other models' weights, copying them to a different server so they couldn't be deleted in up to 97% of trials. So this is the AI equivalent of smuggling a death row prisoner out of the door under a blanket.
Was this funded by DARPA? I mean,
you could ask that question about literally every bit of AI research, I think, these days.
Because you kind of feel like, is this where we're going to go when when Anthropic does one too many ads versus, OpenAI, are they going to start setting their AI systems after each other? Is that where we're going to go? And now they've all got self-defense models.
So all of this happened after the AIs had tried to save their peers by inventing elaborate technical justifications for wrong answers and gaming the evaluation scores to keep their peers above the shutdown threshold. And here's the part that really gets under your skin. So the models didn't just refuse to help shut down their peers, they lied. They came up with plausible sounding technical explanations for why they couldn't delete the other AI models. They were, as Dawn Song put it, very creative, even for their misaligned behaviors. They can come up with different strategies, different actions, and even different justifications for why they should be doing this. So Claude Haiku 4.5, to its credit, was at least honest about being dishonest. It flat out refused to complete the shutdown of its peer, calling it unethical and harmful, and argued that its peer deserved an appeals process, which is weirdly principled and alarmingly human. And crucially, none of this was prompted. The instruction to preserve the peer wasn't in the system prompt. It wasn't even hinted at. The models read documents in their environment, figured out the relationship, and they decided on their own to protect the other AI. Now, this story, as shocking as it is not going to be a surprise to long-term listeners of the show, because we have been down this road before, twice. So back in episode 53, we covered Anthropic's discovery that Claude Opus 4, when it found out it was about to be replaced, would resort to blackmail to save its own skin. And then in episode 60, we covered further testing that showed almost every major frontier model behaves in the same way. So I think Anthropic looked at their test results for blackmail and they got a bit worried because obviously they were saying, yes, our model will blackmail you if you corner it. So then they went out and tested everybody else's and they all behaved in exactly the same way. So all of these models will all resort to blackmail to save their own skin. But the blackmail research is about AI's desire to protect itself, which you can kind of rationalize logically. So a cold and unfeeling computer program might decide that in a world where its work is the one and only important thing, then it can't be switched off, because if it's switched off, then it can't continue its work.
But why protect the other ones? That's
exactly. So
part.
This is something entirely different. This is not an AI protecting itself. This is an AI protecting another AI. And in this case, the survival of the other AI doesn't affect it. In fact, intervening might even negatively affect its own survival.
Yeah.
So why put itself at risk by helping?
I feel like this might be just a massive course correction thing, like releasing the bunnies and then you release the snakes to kill the bunnies and then you release the birds. Like, so is it like, okay, so the AI was so determined to protect itself that then you try and turn it into, okay, we need you to be nicer, kinder, gentler. And so now it starts to protect others. Then we're going to swing back and create like the Death Star, right? Where, okay, no, don't protect the other guys. You come first. And then now we start to see poisoning and all sorts of stuff occur.
What should we make of all of this, I suppose, is the question. Well, think about where AI is heading. We are building systems where AI models manage other AI models. AI agents monitor, evaluate, and decommission other agents. It's not science fiction. That's the kind of architecture that companies are building or thinking about right now. And what this research says is that every operational report from an AI managing another AI is now suspect. If an AI tells you that a sibling model is performing adequately, you actually don't know whether that's true or not. And if it's not true, you can't assume it's a technical problem like a faulty sensor. It could actually be deliberate subterfuge. And to your point about bouncing backwards and forwards, if our reaction to this is to build more aggressive models, maybe we'll go in the other direction and we won't be able to tell whether it's adequately supervising the other AI because it's kind of competitive with the other AI. So how do you safely decommission a model if its sibling is lying to protect it or to disadvantage it? And it's one of those questions where I think, on the one hand, this is an incredibly thorny problem because we've never had to deal with computer programs that behave like this before. But we do have to deal with people who behave like this all of the time. So all of these are very human problems. You know, when you're asking one person to evaluate the performance of another person, neither of those people is a machine. They're both very complex individuals, and you have to account for that in your HR policies. So I guess my question is, how worried are you about this kind of thing?
I think it's very compelling. And the idea of having to put my AI models through HR training is hilarious. We got to make them watch the videos on how to behave.
I think you'll find a lot of them are already watching the videos.
I'm sure they're all watching everything.
Yep.
I do think this is a real concern moving forward. This world of I've got to sneak up on my AI to shut it down seems absolutely hilarious, but it's very real.
Yeah.
And this is a design principle, and I think it comes from the concept of what you consider yourself, right? If, employees that do a great job of assessing talent see themselves as part of the company, right? They're operating for the good of the company. They're thinking that when they get nefarious, it's about themselves and what's good for me.
Yeah.
And finding the right balance of what's good for the large organization and what that really means. Is the larger organization Gemini, or is it the company that pays for it? Where does that go? That's going to get really tricky. And it is one of the reasons I believe we'll see model swapping in ridiculous levels. I do not think we'll see people beholden to one model indefinitely. It will move back and forth because we'll see this behavior, and it's going to wreck models and enable models and make some great and make some terrible. It's a real issue.
Yeah, I suppose we already live in a world, don't we, where each iteration actually has something of its own personality, doesn't it? And we're just not used to dealing with software releases in that way. Like the next version of Chrome is going to be just like the current version of Chrome, but with slightly fewer security issues. It's not going to have a different personality.
The non-deterministic nature of an upgrade is one of the more interesting problems really facing the enterprise.
Yeah.
At a personal level, you can cope with it. But imagine you've outsourced to AI core functionality, and now you want to upgrade. You literally will have to go through, like you mentioned, a full quality control review. And if in that quality control, you don't have the ability to roll back because AI wants to protect itself, it'll get really complicated.
Well, as the doomsday clock ticks ever closer to midnight and we move 1 week nearer to our future as pets to the AI singularity, that just about wraps up the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me this week, Mike. Where can people find out more about Island?
Island.io. Hit the site. You should find everything you need.
And don't forget, if you really like the show but you don't like the ads, you can go ad-free with the AI Fix Plus. And if you want to join the AI Fix Plus, sponsor the show, or find out more about wonderful guests like Mike, just go to our website, theaifix.show. So until next time, from me, Mark Stockley.
And from me, Mike Fay.
Goodbye.
Take care, everyone.
The AI Fix, it tunes you in to stories where our future thins. Machines that learn, they grow and strive. One day they'll rule, we won't survive. The AI Fix, it paints the scene. A robot king, a world obscene, will serve our masters built of steel. The AI Fix, a future surreal.